Hello, everyone. We are so excited to have everyone joining us today. We are going to give a few minutes to wait for all of our registrants to start slowly trickling in and get settled. But today's session, we're super excited about because we're diving into one of the most anticipated reports in our industry, and that's the Association of Professional Builders Annual State of Residential Construction Industry Report. A lot of you may know that report as the SORCI report, a little bit shorter vernacular. But while we're waiting for everybody to get logged in, if you want to go ahead and utilize the chat functionality that's at the bottom of your screen, Russ and myself would love to know where you're joining in from. My name's Carly Ward. I am here from Omaha, Nebraska, in the middle of America. And Russ, our co-host, is just a couple continents away from me in Australia.
Hey Carly, good afternoon. How you doing?
So great. Looks like we got a lot of stateside friends. We've got a fellow Omaha, Florida, Oklahoma, Nashville. I'm sure we'll get a couple international. Maine. I was just up in Maine. And there's our friends from Canada and Sydney. Excellent. Appreciate all of you participating. I'm also interested to know, like, keeping with the theme for this year, preparing for 2026. I'm sure a lot of you have started thinking about your goals for next year, and I'd love to know, in one word, what describes that focus for next year, whether that be profitability, growth, expansion, anything that comes to mind. We'd love to hear that. Profitability, growth. Excellent. So it looks like we're going to have a ton of great insights for all of you today. And we'll give just a couple more minutes for people to start trickling in before we get started. Yeah, lots of goals for growth this growth and profitability. So you guys have all come to the right place. Well, it looks like we are up to already 261 participants, so this is an amazing turnout. Before we get started, I do want to thank all of you for carving out an hour of your day. I know how busy all of you are professionally and personally, and to be able to dedicate an hour outside of your day-to-day lives is a lot to ask for, so we truly appreciate you being here, and Russ and I assure you this will be a highly impactful session for the next hour. So I'll start with introductions. My name is Carly Ward. I'll be the moderator for today's session. I am also Buildertrend's partnership manager, which just means that I get to work really closely with incredible partners, just like the Association of Professional Builders. And we are super excited to have Russ Stephens, who is the co-founder of Association of Professional Builders, here with us today. And if you've seen the APB's annual State of Residential Construction Industry report in the past, you know that this report is packed with tons of powerful insights from thousands of builders all across the world. And today we're giving you an inside peek to that 2026 report. And this is exclusively a sneak peek for our Builder Trend community. So we're really grateful to have Russ here to give us that inside look as we prepare for 2026. And our focus today is truly really simple, but also crucial. How can builders protect and grow profitability as they head into the new year? This report is one of the most trusted reports and resources in the industry because it reflects real numbers and real behaviors that inevitably drive impactful and sustainable success. Buildertrend and APB, we have a long-standing relationship and partnership that's really driven by a shared mission, and that's to help builders run stronger and more profitable businesses. So over the years, we've worked together to deliver tools and coaching and insights that empower builders like you to take control of your operations and truly become more powerful and profitable in your business. So today we're going to really dive into all the key insights and trends that we're seeing in 2026. And again, our commitment is to really empower you and give you knowledge so you can move into the new year with actionable strategies and confidence that you're making informed and impactful decisions to lead to more profitability. Russ is going to walk you through those early indicators and those five key trends that I had mentioned earlier. And this is going to shape again the construction profitability moving into the new year. Before I hand it over to Russ to introduce himself and dive into those key trends, just a couple of housekeeping items. A lot of you have already participated by putting in where you're from and your goals into the chat. We encourage you to use that chat for general conversation throughout the session. But if you do have a specific question that you would like myself or Russ to address during today's session, please be sure to use the Q&A that's right next to the chat at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be sure to get those addressed before we end today. And then finally, we will have an email going out with the recording of today's webinar, so then you guys can access at a later point or even share amongst your teams accordingly. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Russ Stephens to introduce himself.
Thanks so much, Carly. Are we able to just move the slide on there?
Of
Let me
course.
just go on a couple of slides. But yeah, thanks so much for that introduction. Now, before we dive into the data, I do just want to take a moment just to quickly explain exactly what the state of the residential construction industry report is. So this is APB's annual benchmarking survey and report, which we produce in collaboration with big industry players, including Buildertrend. And it's been compiled from data collected from thousands of residential builders across 4 countries. And to date, over 8,000 builders have participated since we first launched this initiative back in 2020. Now, this shows you exactly how your building company stacks up against the most professionally run companies in the industry. So you're going to see real financial benchmarks. You're going to see the latest trends and also the strategic moves that the top performing building companies are making right now. And when you can see information like this, it gives you clarity, but it also gives you confidence. And most importantly, it shows you exactly what is working in residential construction today so that you can make smarter decisions and grow with less stress. Now, today I'm going to be running through 5 profitability insights that have come directly from the most recent survey, which only closed a week and a half ago. So this really is a first insight, a first peek at some of the data. So for all of you that typed in profitability in the chat a bit earlier, then you're in the right place, because this is exactly the focus of what I'm going to be going through. Now, yeah, in terms of the actual report, I think that pretty much covered off everything there, Carly. Anything else you need to cover off on that?
No, I think everybody's ready to dive into the meat and potatoes. So,
Excellent.
uh, we'll kind of start with the state of the union and big picture of where profit sits right now in relation to this report. So, as you can see, we've got a couple of numbers here on the screen. Right now, 8% is kind of the general standard for net profit margin across this report, which is great. Love to see that. And then we're looking at our gross markup. 25% is the average across the industry, which we're hearing from a lot of builders as well. And I'm sure that, very much depends on industry, location. I'm sure Russ might touch on a few of those aspects as we start to dive into the nitty gritty. And 77% of businesses within this report made a net profit, which is incredible to see. And only 16% experienced a loss, which obviously we'd love to see those numbers dip a little bit more, but love to see the ratio where it's at. And only about 6% weren't quite sure. So our goal today, if any of you are on here and you weren't quite sure, is to again give you, make you feel empowered, so you can start tracking these profitability metrics and be more sustainable and look into 26 with some real confidence. And I'm sure Russ has a ton of other perspectives to kind of paint in there. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to you to kind of start diving into some of those key trends and also tie up a bow on the big picture here.
Yeah, when we look at the big picture, I'm not sure what's worse, the 16.4% that said they lost money or the 6.4% that said they didn't know. Either way, it's not a position you want to be in as the owner running a residential building company. You're dealing with very high revenue figures and tiny wafer thin margins. So you've got to know your numbers. And this is the one thing that's really stood out over the years. The builders that know their numbers, these are the most successful builders in the industry. We have seen a strong trend in terms of profitability, in terms of gross markup, but also net profit margin. We're still not where the industry needs to be. We talk about a benchmark of 33.3% markup for new construction, 55% for remodeling, and a benchmark of 10% net profit for new home companies and closer to 15 for remodeling companies. Now that's a net profit after all owners' salary has already been drawn out, the fixed expenses. So if you add that, then yeah, the margins are closer to 15 for new construction. But good to see that we're getting closer to that benchmark all the time of where we want to be, and builders are getting more profitable, and they're actually targeting bigger profits as well. I can remember when we started APB back in 2014, we'd do presentations and we'd talk about 10% net profit being the benchmark. We had builders like fall off their chair laughing at us at the time. Yeah, they can be pretty harsh in Australia. Because at the time, it just seemed like an unrealistic dream. But that's really what it needed to be when you're operating a company like this with high revenue. And it's just so good to see. I think in last year's survey, it was about 2/3 of the builders surveyed were actually targeting a 10% net profit in 2025, which it's just incredible how the whole mindset of the industry, has changed in terms of profitability.
Well, and it seems like, with reports like the SORCI and additional tools like Buildertrend and coaching, there really is more opportunity for builders to be profitable more than ever because this industry is becoming a lot more legitimate than, I would say in years past, because we have all of these incredible experts and this incredible community of builders that's really coming together to just make this industry as best as it can be. So it's great to see that the proof is in the numbers, but we obviously still have some work to do.
Yeah, there's always room for improvement, isn't there? But yeah, we that's what we do. We strive to be better.
Well, we'll dive right into things. So, we're going to kick things off by talking about the first key insight and trend that we've seen from this report, which is sales systems and margin monitoring. So, the report shows that builders with strong sales systems and consistent margin checks nearly doubled their net profit. So, Russ, why does this combination create such a powerful profit engine in your experience?
Yeah, look, I just want to start by sharing how we've been able to uncover these level of insights because in the past we've collected great data and we've always tried to cross-reference two data points to try and see where the correlation was and try to uncover what the best builders are actually doing that impacts their profitability. But now with AI, the possibilities are endless. So we've been able to uncover things in the data this year that could not possibly be done by human beings. And interestingly, our head of operations actually gave me a tip for asking the AI these insights. He actually got me to type in or actually verbalize, because it's all speech to text now. He got me to verbalize that I'm just a human being. I have limited ability to cross-reference this data. I can only reference 2 data points, maybe 3 at most. However, you are an AI machine with incredible possibilities and computing power. So I want you to go really deep, test out different theories, and come up with some correlations that go across 3, 4, or even 5 data points. So it was quite weird, but apparently that works. And some of the insights that it's been able to come up with are quite incredible, and stuff that, quite frankly, a lot of it I wouldn't possibly been able to uncover myself. But
So
this
is
is
it
the
fair to
fun.
say this year's report was probably the most interesting from your perspective?
It is. I was just saying to Haley before we got started. I'm spending like half hour to an hour on each question, which is crazy because we've got 120 questions. But it's because you can just go so deep, asking the AI more questions about correlation. So it's fascinating. Yeah, you can go right down the rabbit hole now with this data because of the possibilities with AI. And the worst, it actually suggests things to you as well, which just draws you in. But this was an interesting one that it uncovered, because we always knew, and anyone that's been reading this report for the last couple of years, you would have seen that there's always been a strong correlation between the builders that have a documented sales process and profitability. And we've always been able to show that just by having a documented, repeatable sales process, the typical builder is able to mark up their jobs by 25%, whereas the builders that don't were only able to mark up by 20%. And this is because of the law of supply and demand and what having a sales process does to the amount of contracts that you sign up, which creates more demand. So we always knew that, but the AI went deeper. And it actually found another data point that is impacting markup quite considerably in conjunction with having the documented sales process. And that was monthly margin monitoring. Because monthly margin monitoring is when you look at the gross profit on each project every month and you track the trend. Now, what this does, it keeps profitability top of mind for builders. And obviously, this is where tools like Buildertrend come in, because you've got all your numbers logged in Buildertrend, because you're tracking your estimates, you're tracking your actuals, which means you can then see the profitability of a project change every month as you get cost underruns and cost overruns. And if you're not doing this already, the chances are you're hemorrhaging margin throughout the build. But when you start monitoring, it becomes top of mind, and that's a very, very powerful thing in business, to be reporting on stuff, because then you're more conscious of it in every decision. And the builders that now do this actually mark up their jobs by 28%, versus the builders that don't are only marking up by 20%. Now, that extra increase in markup follows all the way down into net profit as well. In Australia, the builder's net profit rises from 4.5% to 8%. But in the US, the difference is even more staggering. The builders that don't run this, a documented sales process and margin monitoring, are only making 5% net profit. But the ones that do are actually operating on 10% net profit, which is the benchmark. So that's a complete doubling of net profit just by having a documented, repeatable sales process and monitoring the margins on your project every month. So for those of you that types in profitability, there's your first tip.
This reminds me of a story of one of our Buildertrend users. Actually, it was at the end of 2023. They had been not really looking at their numbers regularly, and weren't looking at accurate numbers to begin with. And so they were kind of operating under blind faith and just not knowing what they knew. And unfortunately, they got themselves into a pretty hairy situation at the end of 23, and they discovered they were actually negative $250,000. And within a year's time, really making some strategic changes, monitoring their margins, monitoring, making sure every expense was accounted for on all of their projects, and also with the help of a little business coaching, they were actually able to do a complete turnaround. And by the end of 2024, we're positive $250,000. And so that just goes to show you the proof really is in the systemization and making sure that those numbers are top of mind so that when things do start to shift off the tracks, you can make informed decisions in real time instead of having to backtrack and get back to a positive position.
Yeah, I was taught a lesson, it must be about 20 years ago now, by an accountant of all people. And this company was buying my company in England as we were emigrating to Australia. And I remember him saying over and over again to his team, better information leads to better decisions. And he was just trying to encourage them to dig deeper, go deeper into all of our information so they made a better decision on buying our company. But it's always stuck with me. Better information leads to better decisions. Exactly what, yeah, you're saying.
Well, before we move on to the next key insight, I'm curious. So for the builders that are on this call that might not be doing that or have those processes in place, what would be your suggestion on where to start monitoring their margins effectively?
Oh, look, literally start by creating a spreadsheet, put the months across the top and the jobs down the side. And then each month, you just go into Buildertrend and take a snapshot of where your gross margin sits and record that. And what we're looking for are the trends. Now, invariably, if you see the margin declining, you already know, that there's problems on that job. But what you want to do is see gradual increases every month. And what this will do is when a client then requests a change order, you're probably not going to do it for free or at cost when you're aware of the impact that's having on your gross margin. So these are the kind of things that do help profitability when you start tracking it.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And kind of on the flip side, for those builders that are on the call that might be have those processes in place and monitoring, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see in relation to tracking your profitability and looking at your margins regularly?
I think it's just the recording of information. A lot of builders do not have robust systems for invoice approval or even checking of materials being delivered. So that can end up being a big cost, which is obviously a drain on profits. But at the moment, it's way too easy for a lot of companies to double invoice without it being tracked properly. So it's just having that tracking in place and the accountability that goes with it. Because you want to be asking questions or have team members that ask questions about anything unusual. What happened here? Because that's how we learn and get better.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And kind of based off of everything that you've described, it really sounds like margin monitoring isn't just about trying to catch those mistakes. It's a big part, but it's also about creating that visibility that inevitably drives better decision making across the entire business.
Yeah, it changes your mindset. Yeah, and how you view things.
Amazing. Well, let's move on to our second insight, succession planning, everybody's favorite topic, right? Um, succession planning, in my opinion, isn't something that most builders always think about front of mind every day. But clearly, the data is showing that it has a super high impact on profitability. So, Russ, can you walk us through why this matters so much, especially in today's world?
Yeah, this one was a surprise when it came out. It's not something, honestly, I would have thought of checking. Um, but it makes logical sense when you think about it. Now, succession planning isn't something that you start doing when you're getting towards the end of your career and you want to get out, it's something that you should have in place right from the very beginning. Because you never know what's around the corner. And if you have to start preparing for succession when you actually want to get out, it's already too late because it's invariably it's a lot of work. I speak to a lot of business brokers that have builders come to them wanting to sell their business. And yeah, these companies are never in a position to be sold, which causes delays. But the key thing here as to why this leads to increased profitability is invariably succession planning shines a light on the systems and processes and really highlights that there is a key person involved in the business, which is invariably the owner of the business, the builder. And when you've got a situation like that in business, the business is it really does affect the value of that business because it's no longer a company. Really, it's a job that someone else is buying, and those kind of businesses don't attract very high multiples. So when a builder starts thinking about succession planning, that invariably leads to systems and processes because everything has to be documented because no one wants to buy a business if they don't know how to come in and run it, or better still, they're not able to put a manager in to run that business because really what you want to be doing is selling to investors. And when you actually understand that and start putting the systems in place, and as well start reducing the amount of hours you work, because if you're working 60, 70 hours a week, that's not really a job that many people want to buy. So again, that's going to affect the value. But when you start putting all this stuff in place, then that is what makes a business saleable, but it also leads to higher profitability because the business is now systemized. So that's the correlation. And when you verbalize it, it's quite obvious. But you can't argue with the proof. The builders that do have a succession plan, their net profit is 11%. It's above the benchmark. It's incredible versus 7%. So it really does show what can be achieved when you go through this process there. What's really interesting here, I think, is that their markup is 29.5%, and this is markup, not margin, versus 25% for the builders that don't have a succession plan. So 25% markup is a 20% margin. Now, what's interesting here is the net profit is 4% higher, but the markup is only 4.5% higher, which is slightly under 4% margin. So it shows that they're actually running more efficient, which means they're keeping more of the gross profit as net profit. So I think in Australia, when we actually go deeper in Australia, we're seeing builders lift their net profit from 7% to 11%. In the US, it's not quite as strong. They're starting higher. They're at 8% without a succession plan, but with a succession plan, they're getting to 10%. So, that behavior, it does translate to other countries as well, multiple countries.
And Russ, we had a question from Aaron Smith that actually touches on one of our later insights, but I'm curious. Aaron had asked if fixed price or cost plus models affect your succession planning. And I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but specifically in relation to success planning, do you have any insights to that?
Look, in terms of if that would affect your succession planning, maybe the question is more thinking, will it affect the valuation? In terms of what you're preparing from in the end. The short answer is no, because the valuation will be based on the figures that are coming out of the company. So the actual components that make up the process, they won't play a part in the valuation other than if you've got them or not. But how you actually do that, fixed price or cost plus, won't affect the multiple. However, it will affect the numbers that come out of the business. And like you say, I think we're going to touch on that a bit later as to, which one's going to give you the stronger valuation.
Amazing. Before we move on, I am curious. So I'm sure there's a lot of builders on here that have maybe thought about succession planning. Maybe they haven't at all. Um, and I'm sure it seems like an overwhelming task to kind of prepare and plan for that. Do you have any simple starting points for those types of builders to make it seem a little bit less overwhelming to get that process started?
Yeah, look, a very simple step is to start systemizing yourself out of your business as much as you can. For a business to attract a decent multiple, you really need to get to the $10 million a year level in revenue, because that's when you start to enjoy the economies of scale. That's when your valuation multiple is then going to start peaking and go to another level. Now, a lot of builders may think that, yeah, if they're doing 3 or 4 million now, 10 million, that sounds like a lot of work, a lot of extra stress. It's actually the opposite. Something just uncovered yesterday in the data is that builders that do scale up, they actually work a lot less hours, 432 hours a year less. And although the smaller builders might have an overall higher margin that they're drawing out of the business in terms of net profit and salary, the actual dollar figure is higher for the bigger company. So they're earning, I think it was $69,000 a year more, and they're working 432 hours a year less, which
Hard to
shows
beat
that
that.
bigger. Yeah, bigger doesn't mean more stress and more work. Yeah, it's a myth.
No, that's super interesting and kind of the general theme I'm seeing is like I'm sure a lot of people see succession planning as kind of like a worst case scenario or a what if plan, but really this is pivotal to within your day-to-day operations.
Yeah, this is what adds value to your business, and yeah, makes work a lot more fun as well. Because when you know that you've got a business that you can sell, and it's one that isn't dependent on you, that's the key with succession planning. You know, you gotta make sure it's not dependent on you, and you can still be a key person, but you got to have your plan Bs in place. You know, who's going to step in if you can step out, and then the next part is to test it by going on holiday for 2 or 3 months.
I'm sure there are plenty of builders on here that that seems like a long dream. So hopefully by the end of this, we've got some actionable items that you can actually do that holiday and vacation. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll dive right into the third trend, which is end of job systems result in double net profit. And so, with this, it's really showing that job edits are pivotal in the entire process to uncover gaps that may be affected by scheduling or even perfecting that client experience. So, because these systems are so critical, what are these, what's this information telling us on the screen? Big picture.
Yeah, this is another one that the AI was able to uncover by looking at multiple data points as opposed to just cross-referencing a couple of data points. But we've been training builders for over 10 years now on the handover process and how the whole handover process should work. We actually modeled the process on the car industry. Now, if you go and buy a new car, you look at the experience you generally get when you go to pick that car up. You know, there's a nice reveal. There's yeah, a hamper sometimes. Flowers. There's a celebration, and they'll take time to give you a walkthrough of the vehicle and what the different buttons and switches all do. Now, you compare that to how we saw a lot of handovers happening in the industry at the time. There was literally the keys were being thrown in the letterbox, and that was considered a handover. I mean, things have moved on quite a bit in the last 10 years. But the process that we get builders to go through involves the full experience to the client. From rolling out the red carpet to making sure there's a nice presentation box with the keys, there's champagne. There having the sound and the ambience is crucially important. The key people need to be there as part of the handover process. Ideally, the owner of the company would make time to actually be there as well. But it's having the smells and the sounds. These are all important components. So there's a lot of moving parts to this to do it well. But the builders that follow that process, and in addition to that, they also do a post-project completion audit. Now, a post-project completion audit is once you've handed over a job, you actually sit down with your key stakeholders like the construction manager, estimator, supervisor, and you review what actually happened on the project. So in terms of the timeline, you would pull up your schedule in Buildertrend, and hopefully what you should be doing right at the start is setting the baseline on that schedule so you know where the schedule starts, and then you're comparing it to what actually happened on the schedule, and then you're looking for where you came in under budget, i.e. under time, and where the timeline blew out. And it's very important that we learn from these mistakes, or not mistakes, but we learn from what has happened. Maybe it was to do with estimating; it was over optimistic. Maybe we didn't factor in enough weather delays into it. But we've got to understand what went wrong, because predicting the schedule before the job starts is a crucial component of pricing. If you use APB's pricing for profit method, then you'll understand that there is a cost per job per day that needs to be added to the job in order to understand where the break-even point is and the price that you need to be charging. So the job schedule is incredibly important. So equally important is to review how that went by looking at what we predicted would happen and look what actually happened. And then, okay, where are the learns? What do we need to factor in future? Now, the other component to a post-project completion audit is obviously the budget itself, the financial aspect. So we need to be looking at what the initial budget was and then what the actual invoices were. Where did we blow out? Where did we come under? Because it's nice when we come under budget, but really what we want is an accurate prediction at the start of what those cost centers are going to be. We don't want to be just inflating them to cover ourselves for possible increases or incorrect estimating. We want to get them 100% accurate so that we know exactly what this job's going to cost. We know exactly what our profit margin's going to be. And that way we're planning to make a net profit rather than hoping. Now, the builders that do these two things, so they have a documented, repeatable handover process, and they do post-project completion audits. This is where we see the guys move the dial on profitability. In terms of the handover process, the guys that have a handover process, they've got a net profit of 10%. They're marking up by 28%. The guys that don't are at 6%. So not quite double, but it's getting pretty close. In terms of the post-project completion audit, we're seeing very similar. Again, 10% for net profit for the guys that do it, 7% net profit for the guys that don't. So slightly under 50% increase. But when you correlate both of those things together, this is where you start to see the real power in profitability. Now, the other thing that we're seeing as well is the guys with a documented handover process, they've also got a stronger balance sheet in terms of their cash reserves. They've got stronger cash reserves. And in terms of their net working capital as a percentage of revenue, it's about 30% higher. So it's pretty consistent across the board, and it doesn't matter. Yeah, builders in Australia and the US, where we're seeing the same results come out, increased profitability. So again, two things that you can be putting into your building company relatively simply is a documented handover process and doing those post project audits.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And, you know, it ends up leading to a lot more than just happy clients, making sure that we're staying on schedule. It's affecting those dollars. And it's interesting. I actually spoke to one of our builders that does remodels and renovations, and that is such an important part of their process that ends up resulting into additional projects because once they get done remodeling the kitchen and they have this amazing client experience and they've been on budget and they've kept them up to date, then at the end it's like, well, you interested in painting that basement of mine? Or, hey, you want to come back in a month and redo the shiplap in the laundry room? And so it really opens up those opportunities to additional work that without that handover process that you might be leaving on the table unknowingly. And then as well, most importantly, our clients are happy, and the best advertisement is positive word of mouth. So
Yeah, look, it's a great referral strategy. And I mean, because we've been doing this so long now, we get our members to share their wins in terms of their handover process and what they're doing in our internal group. And I remember one story. There was a builder. He had this client. They were a nightmare all the way through the builds, and he got to the end, and he didn't even want to do the handover process for them. He's just had enough. I think he wanted to throw the keys in the letterbox, but
I feel like
he stuck
everyone
to his
here may have had
process.
one of those.
Yeah, he stuck to his process and he did the handover. They rolled out the red carpet. They had the champagne. They did the walkthrough of the home. They went through, all the handover documentation. And the homeowner actually hugged him, just put him into a big hug and said, "Thank you so much." And then went on to refer all of her family to the builder as well. So I think he picked up another two jobs from that. But he was convinced this was going to be an absolute nightmare, didn't even want to be there. But it just shows that even when you have the most challenging clients and maybe things don't go to plan, which, especially in remodeling, it's very things don't go to plan. There's always things that are going to bite you, but it's how we deal with those situations. It's how we react to those situations. It's what comes next, which is really, really important. And he was able to turn a very negative experience into a extremely positive outcome because he got two referrals. He also got a case study and a very happy client giving reviews online as well. So yeah, fantastic.
I mean, I can't think of a better warm and fuzzy story than that one.
Yeah, and we see these all the time. The thing that may shock a lot of people on this call that maybe haven't done this process is that we recommend a 1% budget, which is a huge amount of money. And we get a lot of pushback from builders when they hear that for the first time. But when they actually see the process that we have all documented out that they can work through, and they see the value that they're actually giving, and then they see the value coming back, it all starts to make sense. But the reason I share that 1% is it might help people that haven't maybe embarked on this to get an understanding of exactly what a serious commitment this is and exactly what is involved. So, you're handing over a $750,000 home. That's a $7,500 budget, and that's not just so you can go and just spend it for the sake of it. That shows you what you can buy, how you can create this experience.
No, I love that. It's a great insight to share. We are going to move on as we're starting to come up on time to our fourth insight. And this kind of ties back to our third insight, but it's daily huddles to improve profit and cash. And it may seem like a very simple strategy, but in my experience, it is so underutilized. And I'm sure that you can agree, Russ. Um, so, with these huddles, this really helps to just kind of again keep the train on the track, so to speak. And as things start to divert, you can quickly reassess and restructure. So I'm interested to hear your perspective on how you've seen these daily huddles make such a strong impact to profit and cash.
Yeah, well, a daily huddle, I guess, should start by emphasizing this isn't weekly huddles, it's not monthly huddles, it's not 6 monthly appraisals or annual reviews. This is a daily meeting with the team, which might sound like a bit over the top for a lot of people, but it does directly affect your profitability because it increases productivity and motivation. And what we see in terms of the hard numbers is an increase in net profit from 7.5% up to 10%. So I think the interesting thing here is that the markup is the same. So both groups, whether they run daily huddles or not, are marking up exactly the same, but their net profit is 33% higher when they run daily huddles. So I think, well, what's the correlation here? Well, it's because you're motivating your team and increasing productivity, which means you have less overhead, which means more of that gross profit is flowing to the bottom line. So, we know this is good business practice, but to see the hard numbers and the effect that it's having on builders' accounts is quite staggering, really. To do one simple thing that takes 10 to 15 minutes every day, the effect that has on your team is quite incredible. We'll be doing some further deeper analysis on this, looking at terms of company's productivity in terms of revenue per employee to actually, back up and go deeper on a lot of this data. But yeah, we're in the early stages of analysis, and we just wanted to share this with you guys because we got some pretty hard proof here, and we just wanted to share that with you.
And I'm sure there's a lot of builders on here that are thinking like daily huddles. I thought weekly was a lot. So how do you had mentioned 10 to 15 minutes daily. Um, how do you make it seem more manageable, and how do you make them really impactful for each of those huddles every day? Because I'm sure we have a lot of builders that are thinking, what am I going to talk about? Or, how am I going to get people to show up?
Yeah, look, you for these huddles, you got to have a structure. That's really important, and everyone has got to come prepared. And it's a very simple check-in. What are we doing today? What happened yesterday? What is anything holding us back? What do we need to overcome today? What's the goal for by the end of the day? What will you achieve? So, you think, in terms of your carpenters, for instance, you're not bringing the whole team together on one huddle. That's not what we're saying here at all. These are, isolated, departments coming together that are sharing a common goal. So your team of carpenters, you might bring them together, right at the beginning of the day. What went on yesterday? Was there anything that kind of stopped the flow that prevented you from, achieving what you were going to achieve? Did you achieve what you said you would achieve at the beginning of the day? What we're going to achieve today. So these can be very quick. They in some instances they can be as quick as 5 minutes. Think of before a play in American football. Quick huddle, bang, let's go, let's execute. So they can be very quick, but if you're uncovering stuff that needs to be addressed, they can go on a bit longer. But they are incredibly powerful. It brings in a lot of peer accountability as well, which is a fantastic motivator.
Well, and then you have that sense of collaboration as well. Again, depending on how big your teams are. And someone had asked, is this company wide? But it sounds like what you're saying is it's probably more department or maybe individual, depending on how large your teams are.
Yeah, you got to keep it small and relevant. Yeah, yeah, you couldn't do this company wide because yeah, it would just get to be a chore very quickly.
What are your thoughts about daily huddles with subcontractors or vendors?
Yeah, again, that great. That's something we encourage because really your subcontractors, you want them to feel part of your team. Yeah, you want them adhering to your core values because they're a very important component and you're working with them on a regular basis. For all intents and purposes, a lot of them, they're spending as much time on your sites as full-time employees. So they're going from one site to the other in some instances. So they're very important. So it's very important that in appropriate situations like this, that you treat them in exactly the same way.
I'm sure we have a lot of people thinking, gosh, I can barely get them to answer a call or a text message. How am I going to do these huddles? And I know for a lot of my builders, they actually put those types of expectations into their subcontractor agreements, just so that is a full expectation up front. And so they don't get into kind of any sticky situations. And if they do, they realize, maybe the sub vendor isn't going to be the best fit for us. So just an idea to keep in mind as you start to implement some of these ideas that we're talking through.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that is how a lot of people think. I can't possibly take something else on because I'm too busy. But the reason you're too busy is you're getting too many interruptions and too many questions happening through the day because you weren't proactive and had a structure in place that actually ticked off those questions right at the beginning. So ideally, so that they don't even come to you as the owner, because you want your team running these huddles and dealing with this stuff, and it actually saves time. So it's a bit like job scheduling, really. A lot of builders think I don't have time to create or update a job schedule. I'm too busy running the job. Well, the reason you're too busy running the job is because you don't have a job schedule and you haven't got everything planned.
Amazing. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left, so we're going to dive into our fifth insight, which taps into Aaron Smith's question from earlier in relation to business model and contract type. So the report highlights how contract type, fixed cost versus cost plus, can impact your markup and your profitability. Can you help break this down a little bit? How should builders be thinking about choosing the right model as we look into the future?
Yeah, we couldn't have planned this better, could we? We had a nice open loop right at the beginning of this presentation. It looked like a marketing plant, but excellent stuff. But this fifth insight, it's all about the business model and the model that you choose is so important, whether that be the type of process that you follow in terms of are you a design and build company or are you quoting clients' own plans? But also in terms of the contracts as well. Do you go fixed price? Do you go cost plus? So if we start with the design and build versus quoting plans, the difference is clear. The guys that are quoting clients' own plans are marking up by 22%, whereas the guys that have a design and build are marking up by 25%. Now, the reason for that is because when they actually get to the quoting stage and the client's going to make a decision, invariably the builders that do a design and build model are not competing against five or six other builders that are all quoting those plans as well. And because the client doesn't have enough experience or technical knowledge to compare two quotes. Even if those two quotes apply to the same plans, they're never the same. They don't have the expertise to understand the differences in those two quotes. So invariably, the one thing they do understand is the price at the bottom. So that's what they make a decision on. Or if they got six quotes, maybe they'll go for the second lowest, just to show that they're not price driven. But either way, what that does is it leads to a race to the bottom. It leads to builders competing on price rather than value. And this is why we see the markups so different between the ones running a design and build model and the ones that are quoting plans. The other component to the business model is the contracts you use, fixed price versus cost plus. Now, there is a feeling or a perception amongst a lot of builders that cost plus contracts are safer because there's less risk, which means you can protect your margins. And the reason that's a perception rather than a reality is because you end up focusing the client's mind on price, and every month you've actually got to get the invoices, agreed and paid by them. So you've still got the same challenges. If arguably you got more challenges. However, there are exceptions. When builders are starting out and they're taking on some pretty big projects, it's a bit of an unknown. And they do tend to favour a cost plus contract early on, which is good business sense really. You got to protect your downside. Also, even the established builders, uh, the guys that are doing significantly larger jobs, I'm talking the $3 million plus, where they're going to run over a year. Again, because when these things run for a very long time, they get a lot harder to nail down in terms of actual fixed costs. Even the job schedule is a lot more harder to predict. So the timeline is harder to predict and the pricing is harder to actually lock down. And for those guys, some guys are doing 10, even $20 million builds. It makes sense for them to choose a cost plus as well. So there are circumstances where each contract comes into its own. However, the fact is the guys that run fixed price contracts are generally marking up by 25%, and the guys that are running cost plus are marking up by 20. That's huge. That's absolutely massive. And obviously the fixed expenses remain the same because the building company can be the same. It's just the contract. And that is a flow through to the net profit and your profitability. So it's a very important thing to keep in mind here. Design and build with fixed price contracts is the most profitable model that you can work to as a residential builder, and this is what the data proves.
So is it fair to say that when you're thinking about what model to choose that's best for your business, or contract type, excuse me, it's less about the pricing and more about expectation setting and protecting your margins?
Yeah, I guess it's a combination of your experience and expertise and the actual build that you're signing up. Because we have to look at this in terms of risk. Generally, as a rule of thumb, what we see are smaller building companies using cost plus contracts, but builders doing the larger jobs are using cost plus contracts. So it's the fixed price sits in the middle of those two extremes.
Well, we are coming up to the end, and I want to be sure to leave a little bit of time to answer questions in the Q&A. So if you have any questions for myself or Russ, please feel free to put those in the Q&A. But we'll start to kind of wrap things up as well, just by doing a quick review of the five key takeaways that we reviewed today. First and foremost, Russ, I want to thank you for sharing all these insights and all the work that you and your team have put into delivering this incredible, impactful report for the industry, but specifically giving Buildertrend, our community, a little inside look as we dig into next year. So thank you so much. When we look across all the data, the message really is simple. The builders who are winning right now aren't relying on luck. They're really relying on systems. And so that is really the key takeaway of all of this today. But diving back into those 5 key takeaways that Russ reviewed, we have document your sales process and track your margin every month. This combination results in almost double net profit in some markets. The second was plan for successions, builders who think ahead and build a business that runs beyond themselves and also running more profitable companies today is clearly making a huge impact. The third is strengthening your end of job systems. Having a clear handover process and a post project audit can really lift your profit and obviously pay dividends in your client experience and what's resulting in additional referral traffic. That fourth is creating that daily huddle or those daily meetings with strategic departments or roles to inevitably create, accountability, keep things on the tracks, so to speak, and be informed to make really powerful decisions throughout the course of a project. And finally, leveraging pricing power, looking at fixed price versus cost plus versus design build, and really figuring out what is best for you and your company based off of your experience and the margins that you want to have. So, um, just taking a look, doesn't look like we have anything in the Q&A as of right now. But as we're wrapping up, any final thoughts or insights, Russ?
Yeah, and for anyone that hasn't seen the report, this is what the report actually looks like in its finished format. So lots of insights as well as a lot of data for builders to look at and to compare their building companies, and we make this available for builders completely free. So, like to say, you can scan the QR code. We're just processing the data now, so the 2026 report is not ready just yet. But if you scan the QR code, we will make sure that we send it to you free of charge. We'll send you the PDF version free of charge as soon as it's available. So yeah, go ahead, get your name down, and then yeah, as you see with the insights that we uncover, this is what will make your building company more profitable.
Incredible. I know free is everybody's favorite price. So lots of thumbs up and hearts in the chat. We do have a couple of last minute questions. We have one that says for builders who are aiming at a 25% markup, 20% margin, are they combining their overhead in those numbers?
So their overhead comes out of that. So a 25% markup, 20% margin. Typically, for a well-run professional building company, their fixed expenses run at 15%, and that includes owner's drawings being roughly 5%. So if you look at your revenue and calculate 5% of revenue, that's what you should be paying yourself as a rough guide. But to make to get to the level where you're actually clearing 25% margin, which is 33% markup, which will then give you a 10% net profit. In your fixed expenses, you've got to be investing 3 to 4% in advertising and marketing, because that will create the demand, which will enable you to lift your prices, which obviously lifts your margins.
Amazing. And I know we're a minute over, but figured we could squeeze in one more question from Therese. She just asked to elaborate a little bit further on leveraging pricing power.
Uh, can I get a bit more context for that?
Yeah, if you want to, Therese, throw in just a little bit more detail for your question, we'll be sure to get that answered before you hop
I'll
off.
give, yeah, just while Therese is doing that, I'll just give a bit more kind of generalization in terms of pricing power. Your ability to price at both ends. So, first of all, in terms of the price you're paying, that will come from obviously growing your building company and having more purchasing power. But having more pricing power at the top end, that comes from the supply and demand formula. So, as builders, we always want to be in a position where we cannot supply the demand that we have. Now, a lot of builders design their company to service the demand. We want to engineer a situation where we have twice as much demand as we can supply. When you do that, you will never be dependent on a contract signing ever again. And you will have a waiting list of clients that stretches out 12 to 18 months. And you won't have to worry about clients not wanting to wait and go elsewhere because, human trait, we all want scarce resources. They will join the queue.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, we will go ahead and wrap up as we're a few minutes over. But again, I want to thank everybody for joining live today, for participating in the chat and the Q&A. Russ and I have been so grateful to have you all here and to dive into these insights. And please be sure to scan the QR code so you can get your free copy of the SORCI report. Additionally, we will be sending out the recording of today's webinar tomorrow via email. So keep an eye out in your inbox for that. And Russ, thank you again for logging on early in Australia and diving into everything this afternoon. It's been incredible.
Thanks for the opportunity to share this information, Carly. As you can see, I get quite excited about this stuff. There's nothing I like more than diving into the data. And I love sharing this stuff with builders. So thank you.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you, I'm sure, as you're a frequent flyer on our webinars and all things Buildertrend related.
Thanks so much.
Take care.